these areas getting this push of water.
And you know, anyone who lives here knows that at the full moon, they worry about coastal flooding around the time of high tide. You know, it's just that astronomical pool is higher than normal. And so that's already an issue. We've had some onshore flow. Seeing some of the reports now to Charleston around Broad Street and Lockwood, some water, some flooding there.
Roads closed there.
Yes, 80 now starting to take on water from Savannah to Tybee Island. So that's probably going to be closing soon too. So there certainly are impacts that people are dealing with.
All right, so here's the tide cycle, the way it runs. And remember, the high tide times all the way through probably the next 24 hours are important. Most of these watches and advisories will go until tonight. The late tides.
So the high tide this morning, and then the next one tonight will be the ones we're really going to watch.
Yeah. So we'll watch all of that. If you're out there this morning in areas, we're live in Charleston, but let's say you're actually into Maryland or you're looking at some of these other coastal areas well into the Gulf, send us those images of the high water that's in your community. We'll put them right out to everybody on AMHQ. Anna Rittis has been doing that all morning long, and might as well start there. Anna Rittis, good morning. I saw you when we were taking your live camera kind of wading out into the street there. So let's talk about how this flooding is going on in Charleston.
The first questions I had about weather was, why does the wind blow?
Yeah.
I mean, why is it so strong sometimes and not others? And it has to do with high and low pressure and where they are and how close they are to each other and how strong it is. Minneapolis, we are also going to get a lot of wind, and actually kind of related to the wind that New York City is going to be getting. Not the same wind, but related, and I'll show you how in just a second. Minneapolis, let's take a look out there right now. Big changes are coming to the city. I would say enjoy the weather that you have, because it's not getting better in the next 24 to 36 hours. Let's take a look. Today we've got 56 and cloudy. Not so bad, because the rain comes in overnight tonight. The showers are still around tomorrow morning, and then here comes the wind. It's going to get very windy, and it's going to bring in some cold air, and we may actually be talking about snow. Yes, even for you in Minneapolis. I'll explain. But today we've got temperatures out there in the upper 50s, very close to average all across the area. Nothing really happening just yet. You know, we're tracking that low pressure, the one we've been talking about in the south. That's coming up through the Midwest. That's actually going to help draw the air all the way across the Northeast and really increase your winds in the Northeast. But it's also going to help increase the pressure gradient as we see our next round of high pressure dig down across the upper Midwest. Here it is. So here's our low. Here's the wind for New York City. Here's our high, and in between, very strong winds coming down from Canada out of the upper Midwest, and we are going to feel it. It is going to cut through you, the first big wind chill event of the season. So temperatures are going to feel a lot colder than the actual readings on your thermometer. Winds are going to be 35 to 40 miles per hour. Watch this wind just spread right across the northern plains into Omaha, into Kansas City. Heads up for the World Series tomorrow night. Very, very windy coming your way, and it's very chilly northwest wind. So when we talk wind chill, Minneapolis tomorrow morning, 27 degrees, 29 in Des Moines, Chicago, 28 degrees. You have permission to definitely get out your hats and your gloves and even your winter coats, because it is going to feel it all across the alone. That omelet reminded me of that 21-day diet we were talking about with Steph. Something about so you could eat that part of it if you're on that 21-day diet. Let's throw the maps on the floor, and we've got to look at everything you need today. Weather-wise, there's a lot going on across the country, especially from the south to the Northeast to the Midwest. We are all involved with this big low pressure, the one that we were tracking yesterday that brought all the wind and the rain. It's still on the move. It's still a big factor in our forecast, and it's going to mean that we still have rain concerns in the southeast. There's a couple of things going on in the southeast. Yes, that low is a factor. It's moved inland. It's still helping, though, bring in the onshore flow. We got this old front across the area as well, but we're also wedged into the southeast with rainy, cool conditions, windy conditions too, and we'll talk more about the awful day you have ahead in Atlanta and Charlotte and Greenville and points in between. And when we get to shake out of that, it's part of the story for today. All right, back to the maps on the floor. And the Northeast, rain comes our way today. You know, we had a pretty good day yesterday. Last night was a little chilly for many of you. I saw Saranac Lake down to 18 degrees. Things are changing today as clouds return to the area. This low pressure, the reason why, it tracks up to the Midwest. Sort of takes an odd track, right? So it tracks up through the Tennessee Valley into the Midwest. We're going to see some winds screaming actually from the southeast, affecting us into the Northeast today and especially tomorrow, and moisture and rain coming in too. We're going to be watching all of that. So the next big story is what comes next after we finally stop talking about this area of low pressure. Well, it's all associated, and behind that, we've got some cold air coming in and some very blustery conditions right through the upper Midwest. Wind chills will be a factor. Chicago, 28 degrees is what it's going to feel like, Sam. So this season, wind chill is now part of our vernacular every day. We got to check that.
Every day we're in.
and around the full moon, which is what we have. So full moon officially today, and it happens to be a super moon as well, but it's going to be a concern for us right along the coastal areas, both the Gulf Coast and the Atlantic coast too. Now, another thing we want to talk about in the southeast is we want to talk temperatures and weather. We've got a lot of rain to talk about in the south, but for the Atlanta area, we're going to talk temperatures for you because it's awful if you step outside. It is raw, it is windy, it is cool, and it's actually not going to warm up much this afternoon. What's happening here? Well, we are stuck in a wedge, as we like to call it in Atlanta. It breaks by tomorrow. But we've got high pressure up into northern New England, and that high pressure is kind of wedged down right along the edge of the Appalachians. The cooler air is sort of sunk down, right? Cold, dense air sinks down, and there's nowhere for it to go to get out of the area. We're stuck in it, thanks to that east wind bringing it all down. And the fact that we have this very strong low pressure, the same one we've been tracking yesterday, the pressure gradient between the low and the high is really making those east winds scream right down the Appalachians. So we are just stuck in this wedge from the southeast. And it's not just Atlanta. It's actually to Greenville and Spartanburg and Charlotte and even Raleigh, a tough weather day. But meanwhile, in Florida, you can see your temperatures on the warmer side. You're not being influenced by that. You do have some rain, though, to deal with out there. So today we're going to 81 in Tampa, 77 in Jacksonville, only 51 in Charlotte, only 53 in Atlanta, well below average. We break the wedge by tomorrow, and we'll see improving weather. You know, another interesting factor is the fact that with this wedge, we've got some drier air coming on in. And when you bring precipitation into dry air, that evaporational cooling helps bring down the temperature as well. So everything is working against you today there in the southern Appalachians to not warm up your temperatures. But here we go. Tomorrow, the wedge lifts. We get temperatures warm back up. The winds turn around from the west or the southwest, and it is back to life as we know it in the southeast. In Charlotte, temperatures warm back to the upper 70s.
All right.
Sam and Jim, back to you.
But we don't lose those winds because those two